All right, guys. So early this morning, I told you that the liberal media antics were going to get out of control and comical on the anniversary of January 6th. And I was not wrong about that. In fact, we have one anchor, Mr. Jonathan Capehart, a.k.a. Mr. Jonathan Sweetheart. He is actually going to break down in tears on set live because of January 6th, okay? He's going to break down in tears while talking about January 6th, okay? Again, the propaganda just never ends. It's like I told you guys, they've started a whole new industry, okay? You know, we have the boohoo, whining, and crying racism industry. Now we have the boohoo, whining, and crying about January 6th industry. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, okay? So we are going to react to MSNBC's Skittles propagandist and his reaction to January 6th, as he's basically talking about how the American people aren't buying into the propaganda from Democrats in the mainstream media when it comes to January 6th. He's also going to bring one of the January 6th police officers on set as well, too, to, boohoo, whine, and cry about January 6th. So without further ado, let's get into it.
The persistent threats to our democracy, with Republican voters casting their first presidential primary ballots this month, and with Donald Trump continuing to hold a commanding lead, even expanding lead in the polls, we're faced with the possibility, the startling possibility, that the man impeached for inciting the rioters on January 6th could be elected again. The man who claimed the insurrectionists had love in their hearts, who referred to January 6th as a beautiful day, and who vowed to pardon the rioters criminally charged in connection with the violence, people he now calls hostages.
Yeah, again, this to me is no different than, the woke revolutionaries referring to the BLM rioters as civil rights activists or social justice demonstrators. But, hey, you don't see people, throwing a fit over that, right? The media is not throwing a fit over that.
Yesterday, in his first campaign speech of 2024, President Biden issued a warning about what's at stake.
Trump began his 2024 campaign by glorifying the failed violent insurrection on our Capitol. The guy who claims law and order sows lawlessness and disorder. Trump's not concerned about your future, I promise you. Trump is now promising a full-scale campaign of revenge and retribution, his words. This is the first national election since January 6th. Insurrection placed a dagger at the throat of American democracy since that moment. We all know who Donald Trump is. The question we have to answer is, who are we?
The president is right, and the answer to that question from some in the Republican Party is frightening. According to a new Washington Post University of Maryland poll, Republicans are now less likely to believe that insurrectionists were mostly violent and less likely to believe Trump bears responsibility than they were in 2021.
AKA the liberal media's propaganda is not working, right? And they're upset about it. They're mad that it's not working. But hey, is anybody surprised? Okay, when you spend every single day boohoo, whining, crying about January 6th, okay, and over-exaggerating what happened that day, yeah, people are going to get turned off, okay? People are going to say, hey, you know what? I think that you might be exaggerating about this. I think that you might be overblowing what actually happened that day. And also, with the evidence that have come out to suggest that there's a lot of innocent people that have been locked up and smeared, despite the fact that, hey, they were given a tour of the Capitol. They were let into the Capitol. They were given high fives and butt smacks by, the Capitol police officers. And they also weren't violent. Yeah, people are going to change their mind because they've seen evidence that suggests that, hey, the narrative on this isn't exactly what the liberal media is saying that it is, okay? But because we live in a wicked country, okay, this is what happens, right? In a wicked country, a wicked nation, you will make innocent people criminals, right? You will make them out to be criminals, okay? People who tell the truth or who are threats to the establishment, they will be thrown in the same basket as criminals.
That's an insult to the hundreds of men and women in law enforcement who fought valiantly before our eyes to uphold their oaths to serve and protect the Capitol against a mob incited by a commander-in-chief who violated his. In the days and weeks following the insurrection, 5 officers died: Officer Brian Sicknick, Officer Jeffrey Smith, Officer Howard Liebengood, Officer Gunther Hashida, and Officer Kyle DeFreitag. More than 100 others were injured, leaving physical and emotional scars. Former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone was there that day, there on the west front of the Capitol, battling the mob. He was dragged down the Capitol steps. He was tased by someone in the pro-Trump mob. He suffered a heart attack during the fighting. And in a detail that crystallizes the horror that unfolded on January 6th, Fanone recalls insurrectionists shouting, quote, "Kill him with his own gun." Despite having lived through that harrowing assault and living with the consequences of that trauma, Fanone has not stopped defending our democracy. He has sought to hold those responsible accountable, and he has an urgent message for the American people as the 2024 presidential campaign season gets underway. Fanone told HuffPost, quote, "Ultimately, you, the American voter, will be the last line of defense when it comes to preserving democracy as we know it and ensuring the peaceful transfer of power. And it's that serious." Now in studio is Michael Fanone, former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer, Courage for America Council member, and author of Hold the Line, The Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America's Soul.
So what's up with all this, bro? Right? What's up with all these cops trying to sell something? Okay, I mean, you got the one cop that's trying to run for Congress. Okay, you got this guy trying to sell a book. Okay, I mean, it's almost like all these officers have turned this into a grift. It makes me question whether or not some of their stories are 100% believable. Okay, when you're talking about, for example, somebody saying kill him with his own gun, right? Is that something that was actually really said? Do we have proof and evidence that that's what it was actually said? Or is this something that's being said to try to sell a book, okay? A book full of Democrat Party talking points. Again, this is the same party that spent a whole year demonizing police, and then all of a sudden, they were the most pro-police party ever when it comes to January 6th. It's really a shame that these police officers have allowed themselves to be used as pawns and tools by a party that is shown to hate law enforcement and to hate law and order. I really don't understand it.
Officer Fanone, I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today. Please tell me your thoughts on this 3rd anniversary.
Bruh, let's replay this, bruh. Look at this guy. Look at this, bro. This is crazy, bro. The propaganda here is just on a whole new level, bruh. They're not even trying to hide it. Let's replay this.
Officer Fanone, I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
Wow. This guy's as soft as the tissue that he's wiping away his fake tears with. There's no doubt in my mind this guy definitely sits down when he pees, and he prefers Tampax. Again, this guy is crying. You're crying about something that happened 3 years ago. Something that you are not a part of, you don't have any experience with, and you're sitting here boo-hoo, whining, and crying like a little baby on set over something that, again, you had nothing to do with. You weren't there. You didn't experience it. Yes, this police officer, says he went through a tragic incident, okay? And, hey, I feel for him. But at the same time, let's keep it 100, though. Are the tears necessary? Where are these tears for David Dorn, who is a police officer that died, okay, while trying to protect his community during the BLM riots? Where are the tears for him? Why is it that these Capitol Police officers are getting so much more attention and praise and admiration than the police officers that had to deal with the Summer of Love from BLM? Again, this is how you know it's straight propaganda here, right? Because if it was about police having to deal with political violence in this country, they should be given the same attention and praise to the police officers that have had to deal with all of the political violence that have happened in this country. But see, if they did that, they'd have to talk about the left and the political violence in this country coming from the left, because a vast majority of political violence in this country does come from the left. And I'm pretty sure police officers have dealt with a lot more political violence from leftists than they have from people on the right. Again, what about all these police officers that are being attacked by these far leftists that are protesting on behalf of Palestine? Has any police officer that has dealt with that has been injured as a result of having to deal with that. Have any of them been interviewed by MSNBC, bought on the network to talk about their experience? Did any of the anchors boohoo, whine, and cry on set for them and what they're going through? Again, you have police officers like, again, David Dorn that have died, okay, as a result of left-wing protests. And you have families that, have been affected. People have been killed, died as a result of left-wing protests. And they don't get the same attention or tears that these guys are getting. Because, again, it doesn't fit the narrative. That's not the type of propaganda that they want to show, right? It's amazing how that works. Okay? Again, this is propaganda. This is acting. Either that or this guy is severely Trump deranged. Probably both, right? It's probably a little bit of both. But the fact this man is sitting here boo-hoo-on and crying 3 years later about what happened on January 6th, again, it just shows you how much the mainstream liberal media really wants to go out of their way to really push this narrative about January 6th being the absolute worst day ever. That's how desperate they are, okay? They paid this man to cry on television about something that, again, he did not experience whatsoever. It's sad. It really is. And it's pathetic. Right? More so than anything.
Please tell me your thoughts on this third anniversary.
We are still in the midst of the same fight that began on January 6th, 2021. And we have a lot at stake in this country. And I think that it deserves every American's attention.
Donald Trump continues to defend the insurrectionists, as he did at a rally in Iowa last night. Listen to this.
Those J6 hostages going to jail for 20 years and 18 years and 12 doctors, lawyers, carpenters, electricians, truck drivers. It's one of the saddest things. It'll go down as one of the saddest things in the history of our country. And they went there to protest a rigged election.
Officer Note, how damaging is it for Trump to label those violent rioters who were criminally charged and convicted as hostages? The man who attacked you with that stun gun was sentenced to more than 12 years in prison.
Yeah, but see, again, were all of them violent, right? How do you know for certain that Trump was referring to violent January 6th protesters? How do you know that? I think clearly what Trump is referring to, and I think this is what a lot of people are actually referring to when they talk about January 6th, they're referring to the people that were nonviolent. The people that are talked about the most are the people that just walked into the Capitol, were given a tour, okay, that, hey, they didn't do anything violent. They were just there. They were let in. Those people who are getting harsh sentences for something that is extremely petty, right? I think that's most likely what Trump was referring to. But again, leave it to Jonathan Sweetheart to spin it, okay, and try to make it seem like everybody on January 6th was violent. And then they wonder why less people are believing this, right? Why are less people buying into our propaganda? It's because clearly you have an agenda, right? Clearly there's an agenda here. And the agenda is not to tell the truth, okay? It's not to be balanced. It is to push one narrative that's clearly in favor of Democrats.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you got to think about those individuals that received those lengthy sentences. They did so because, A, they engaged in an insurrection, but their actions that day were violent. And that violence, was directed towards law enforcement officers. And so, I think it's clear that they deserve the sentences that they received. But by Donald Trump referring to them as hostages and speaking about them sympathetically, he's lending his authority as the former president to their actions. And he's telling Americans, his supporters, that I'm going to continue to support you and I'll do everything I can. And if I become president, I'll even pardon you if you can commit acts of violence on my behalf.
What's your response to Republicans, particularly those Republicans who responded to the Washington Post University of Maryland poll, who are growing more sympathetic to the insurrectionists?
I don't know what to say to them, and quite frankly, I don't think there is anything to say. They've made their decision. You know, we're 3 years out from the January 6th insurrection. We had the benefit of a bipartisan January 6th Select Committee investigation.
Bipartisan. Again, it's it's just so funny. If anybody is calling the January 6th Commission bipartisan, that tells you that they are clearly a partisan individual, right? That is a partisan statement to call the January 6th Commission a bipartisan commission. But again, I'm trying to figure out in my head what makes these officers so much more special than all the other officers in this country that have dealt with political violence coming from the left, right? Why are these guys getting a microphone put in front of their face and not other police officers who have dealt with political violence from the left? And see, this is the thing that I say about the Republican Party, right? The Republican Party could easily turn this back around on Democrats by basically just finding police officers that are willing to speak out about their experience dealing with the left-wing extremists, right? And the experiences that they've gone through, and to highlight those voices and make a whole January 6th thing out of that, right? The BLM Summer of Love, right? The BLM riots. Find some police officers that dealt with that and get them to come out here and boohoo whine and cry the same way that these police officers are, right? As a counter narrative. Because let's keep it 100. Again, these police officers aren't special. They dealt with political violence the same way that a lot of police officers around this country are dealing with political violence. But it seems like in this country, they only care about political violence when it comes from one side of the aisle. And when it comes from that side of the aisle, it's extremely rare. But the political violence that frequently comes from the left, oh, well, they don't really care about that. They sweep down the rug. And if you're a police officer that happened to experience a traumatic event as a result of your interactions with left-wing extremists, they don't care about you, right? In fact, you're a part of the racist system that's holding down the black man, and that's the reason why these riots happened in the first place, right? So again, it's just so hilarious to me. It's just so funny how they're ratcheting up the propaganda to a whole new level on the January 6th anniversary. And they definitely did not disappoint. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black conservative perspective. Peace.